Welcome to thee. It is so great to see my fellow fantasy fiction fanatics for this next adventure into the Belgariad series. I was bestowed upon a mighty quest from my great friend Bard in the Discord to introduce this next learning session in the great cantor of the mighty Mandorallen. For thy entertainment, of course. Please, I beseech thee to let me know if I have completed this noble quest and have entertained thou. Now, let us sally forth and join our mighty friends in their great adventure. Welcome back, Fantasy Fiction Fanatics. It's great to see you again, and I hope you're doing well. I apologize in advance if it looks like I am melting throughout this video. It is probably because I am melting throughout this video. It is super hot outside right now, and I have no AC in my apartment, so it's very, very hot inside my apartment as well. And I feel like I'm dying a little bit, but that's okay. We will make it through this video together. I just might be chugging a whole bunch of water, so please forgive me in advance. And if I pass out, you know, it's just a heat wave or something. Don't worry about it. I'll be fine. It's okay. Today's class, we are going to be working on the next set of chapters for Magician's Gambit from the Belgariad series, chapters 11 through 15, right here. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. We are getting pretty good ways through the book. We're more than halfway done, maybe 2/3, I think. So we're going steadily along. Before we jump into today's recap, let's go ahead and go over the trivia question. Of course, if you are interested in joining in the trivia question, it is weekly and it's over on the blog, fantasyfictionfanatics.net. If you are on mobile, you'll have to scroll almost all the way down to see it. If you're on desktop, it will be on the right-hand side. You'll just have to scroll down just a little bit and you should see it there, and you can answer and see if you get the question correct. Okay, so last week's question, the correct answer was nymphs. And congratulations to Brendan, Paul, Christian Sinedra could have done better, and Noobmaster69 for the correct answers. Also respectable answer from both Roast Beef and from Troy, who answered with Dryads. They are very close. For the question, it was a very close answer, just not quite what I was looking for. Dryads are specifically related to trees and that kind of nature, versus nymphs can be any other kind of, well, not any other, but any kind of nature they can be attuned to. They have multiple different types of nature that they can be belong to. So nice try. I hope you guys will get the next ones correct. I believe in you. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump into today's recap. Okay, so in this set of chapters, we start in the Vale with Aldur visiting the Vale. Finally, we get to meet Aldur, who we have heard quite a bit about. He comes to the group and they all get to meet him, and he ends up talking to Polgara and Belgariad on their own. So he spends very little time with the group, mostly spends his time with Polgara and Belgariad. And then we have Garon tries to move this rock while they're talking. He tries to move this rock and ends up burying himself in the ground after he flips it over. The next day, Belgariad takes him back to the rock in order to teach him a little bit more about how to work magic better, how to think about it better, and move the rock back, because nothing is supposed to be moved inside the Vale. We do get to meet also Belgariad's brothers. We get to meet 3 of them. And Aunt Pole ends up getting into an insult battle with her Uncle Belden. So that is very interesting and shocks a lot of the company that she has. And then as they continue on to Prolgu, I think that's how it's pronounced, Prolgu, they are attacked by the Hrulgan, and they do end up beating them after they are attacked, and they manage to continue on after that. And as they're continuing to go on, they do encounter another set of creatures, the rock wolves, and they also encounter an Eldrek, whose name is Gruul. And they start to follow them on their group, and they end up having to scare away the rock wolves, and they kill Gruul. It does take a lot out of them, and they almost are concerned about being able to defeat Gruul, because he's a lot harder to defeat than they expect in the first place. And they end up having to call on Polgara's mom, her spirit, to come down and help defeat him, which really drags at Belgariad. He ends up mourning her all over again and being in a weird spot, but he ends up making it through, and they reach Prolgu right at the end of these chapters. I hope you guys are enjoying the books so far. We still have a little ways to go with 2 more books after this, but we are making steady progress, and I hope that you are enjoying it. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about our first thing for today. So let's go ahead and start all the way back at the beginning of the section and talk a little bit about Aldur. Even though we only see him for a short time, we have previously discussed a couple of the other gods that we have seen in this series so far. And they are on the opposite spectrum to each other. We talked about Issa and how he's very calm. He's on the side of defeating Torak, and he's, wanting to go back to sleep, wanting to just kind of be out of the picture of everything. And then we have Mara, who is on the earth mourning a death of someone who is very important to him, and he's just causing catastrophe in the area that he's in, and he doesn't give a crap about anything or anybody other than the loss that he has suffered. So we have these 2 polar opposites of gods, and then we've got Aldur, who is yet another side or another picture of what the gods can be like. I don't know what you expected Aldur to be like, if you expected anything, but I feel like Aldur is what I expected, but also is such a quick meeting that it's kind of hard to wrap your head around exactly who he is anyway. It still keeps that mystery about him, because we don't really get a chance to interact with him very much. I think it's very interesting that we have built up and built up and built up to this moment. We know a lot about Aldur. We've had a lot of mentions of Aldur. Belgariad learned his magic from Aldur and is his master and is somebody who is important to him in his life. So we really feel like we have a lot of mentions, a lot of connection to Aldur compared to any other god. The only other god that we know a lot about is Torak, perhaps. But we have kind of a build-up throughout, I feel like, all 3 of the books so far that we read. So we read 1, 2, and then up to this one. And just get so excited to have Aldur coming, and it's a very, very quick meeting. Lasts a chapter, and you don't even see him the full chapter. It's just at the beginning of the chapter. So I think it's very interesting that Eddings has built us up step by step by step to this meeting that then almost kind of falls short of our expectations. We don't really get a chance to interact with the god. We don't get a chance to see him in action. We don't know much about him really other than what he looks like. It's very, very interesting that we have this progression and this build up to such a short meeting. Though it's very possible that he could come back and we will meet him again. That's very possible. But it's just very, I don't want to say anticlimactic, because I didn't really feel that disappointing, but a little disappointing to have finally the god that we've all been waiting for in the midst of our party here that that are doing this great adventure. And he barely spares them a moment to talk and to interact with them and let them know what the plan is. Instead, he just talks to Belgariad and to Polgara. I would really love to know what you think of the shortness of his visit, as well as if he lived up to your expectations, what you're hoping for, what you're not hoping for, what you think of Aldur in general. Just would love to know your thoughts and feelings on him. But just to talk about him and what we do get of the presence that he has, he is very... This is going to sound, I think, like a little bit of a paradox, but he seems much more simple than the other gods that we've met, as well as a little bit more majestic, which you're probably thinking like simple and majestic doesn't really work. But he is very much a simple looking person, you know, he isn't, you know, fancy, he isn't extraordinary like with like jewelry and like seems godly or anything like that in the fact of his looks. So that's what I meant by simple, is he just seems like he could be an ordinary guy, but also majestic because the fact that he gives off that aura of being a god, and so that even though he doesn't adorn himself and make him seem like he's a richly king sort of god, he is, the presence of himself is very much godly and very much way above all of their heads. They do understand just by being in his presence that he is a god and that he is somebody of magnificence. So I think it's really interesting combination where his looks are described as somebody just naturally going along doing their own thing, an older gentleman, but nothing crazy, but then his just actual aura and just his actual being is such a majestic being that you can't mistake him for anything other than who he is, and that is someone who is a god. And so compared to the other gods that we've seen, he's very much, I feel like, a middle ground, like where he seems more real than Issa was, but also less dramatic than Mara was. Just another viewpoint that we have of the gods. This one is very simple, seems very, very nice. He doesn't seem like he's a really harsh person, at least at this little glance that we've been given. Obviously, we've seen a little bit from Belgariad that his personality and what he can and cannot be. But from this simple interaction, he's very courteous to all of them. He smiles at them, acknowledges them and their roles, and seems like someone who is truly grateful to have people who would follow him and to follow what needs to be done in order to help the world. So again, I'd love to know your thoughts, your feelings, everything like that. I would love to hear about it down below. Please let me know what you think of Aldur and how it's such a small meeting that we have with him. Okay. Alright, let's go ahead and talk about our next thing, which is magic. I feel like we've talked a little bit about magic the last several times, but this book is really focusing so far on magic, especially since Garon can now do magic. We're starting to see more and more about how magic works, especially as he's being taught magic. So I think that that's going to be kind of a significant part of this book. We've already seen that it's a significant part of what's been going on and stuff like that with him doing magic and them wanting to teach him and things like that. But also it's called Magician's Gambit, which seems like a good title for learning about magic. So I think that's going to be kind of the theme of this book, is to be learning more about the magical side as Garon practices and learns more about it. So we see the first portion of magic that's done in this section is Garon trying to move this rock. And it's partly because Belgariad's first magic that he ever did was moving a rock. So I think that's a little bit about why he decides to go and practice moving rocks. So he doesn't realize it, but as he's working this magic and moving this rock, he sinks himself down into the dirt because he doesn't understand how to work magic. And of course, all of his companions get a great laugh about the fact that he ended up being stuck in the dirt and couldn't get himself out. But it is definitely interesting to think that the magic that he was doing to lift this rock then inserted the force back at him because he did not do it correctly. So there is some kind of physics or whatever else you want to say involved in magic, and the fact that you can't just exert force on one object without exerting force oppositely on yourself. And so he learns as we move forward, and this magic becomes more complicated and more sophisticated, that magic you can use the energy around you in the world, and that is one place that you draw upon magic to be able to work magic, I should say. So we find that it's now more complicated and more sophisticated magic, as it's not just the will and the word anymore. It's the will and the world plus how you use your will, because you have to first take energy from the world in order to exert it, and also you have to be aware of what your magic is doing and how you are pushing out your will to make sure that you're not, stuck in Garon's position where you end up sunk in the ground trying to move something. And it's very interesting because, once again, Belgariad keeps saying that Garon understands the more complex magic and the more complexities of the world much easier, much quicker than he would understand the more simple terms of magic. He thought that, it would be understandable that you have to, in order to lift this rock, you also have to exert force the other way on yourself, so that way you're not dug into the ground. And that's not something that Garon understood right away or instinctively, even though Belgariad feels like that is something that's very simple. But then the complexity of, Torak and the orb and all this kind of stuff, he's like, oh, okay, but you get those concepts, great. Like things that would be, or the part of destruction versus creating something. That's the more complex magic, and he gets 100% why it works the way it does right from the moment that Belgariad mentions it. It's also very interesting that this magic, which we've seen a couple times and we've heard a couple times, makes a magical noise that other people who know magic can sense and can hear. I think that's a very unique concept to this particular type of magic than a lot of other magics. Not saying that other magic can't be loud, but that it's more of a attuneness to being able to sense the presence of magic, and how much force and how much will it is to do certain things makes more noise, or in Garon's case, in the fact that he doesn't know how to do things quietly, he makes more noise. And that means that other people can tell what he's doing, where he's doing it, and all that kind of stuff. So I find that very interesting, and again, adds another layer and complexity to the magic. So it seems like we're continually building this magic and how it works and how it must be used, the rules in which it must be used in order to be effective. So we're just really making things more complex, adding more to it, understanding more of it, that kind of stuff. So Garon also is having to work to figure out how to build his power inside him and exert it instead of just doing things in the moment. And I think that that's also very interesting, that that's something that is hard for him. He is struggling with building the will inside himself in order to then push it out. It's not him. It's not instinctual for him unless he's in a moment of crisis or a moment where he doesn't have time to think about it and he just does it. In order to consciously do something, it's much harder for him. So again, I think that also shows the fact that Garon has a harder time with the simple things and an easier time with the complex things. Maybe we will see in the future why he is that way, or how that is helpful for the kind of person that he is supposed to be, the person that's supposed to save the world and defeat Torak. So maybe that is the way he needs to be in order to do well. But I think it is definitely interesting in the fact that you would think that the basics of magic is to gather your will, and that's what he struggles on doing on a conscious level. But doing magic instinctively in the moment is much easier for him, where he's just going off of what he thinks or instinct and just kind of making it happen. So it's very, very interesting and becoming much more complex, and we are seeing a lot more sides to magic than just the will and the word that was originally presented to us back in the book 1. So definitely let me know down below what you think of this magic system. If you are enjoying the more complex building blocks, that I guess you could say, that we're learning about it here. If you like this magic system, if you don't like this magic system, what you think about it in general, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. Please let me know. And we can go ahead and move on to the last topic for this section, or at least last main topic, and that is more world developing. We have got a lot more chances of world building in this last couple of chapters. Because, as we talked about a little bit, I believe they get attacked by the creatures in book 2. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time when they were attacked by crazy creatures, I believe, was in book 2. And we haven't really seen much of that. And we talked before, when they got attacked, that it kind of world built in the fact that, okay, we see that there are creatures. There's not just, humans that live in different countries and things like that. We actually see that there's a little bit more complexity to this world with some fantasy-based creatures. But then we never really saw more again. We did have with the prologue that there are some kind of creatures in this world, but we haven't really had experiences with them. And then in the last couple chapters, we have 2 experiences that are crazy of creatures attacking them. We have the Hrulgen, I believe is how it's said, but the Hrulgen that are like horses but aren't horses, that Hitar rides as part of, taking them down and being able to move forward. So we see them, and we see how crazy they are, and we get a little bit of description that they're kind of like horses, but they're not really horses. They just seem like they are. But they're very, very violent. They attack in the big herd, and so then they had to take down the leader in order to disperse the rest of them and to leave them alone. So we have those creatures that are very interesting and are, I believe, very unique. I haven't seen lots of other stories that have these type of creatures in them. And then, before they can make it to Prolgu, they also are attacked by a group of rock wolves, which is a very interesting name for things that they say aren't really wolves. And then we've got, the Eldrek, which we weren't really, at least I wasn't really sure based on the description that we gave there, exactly what an Eldrek is. We just know that this one's name is Gruul and it can talk. And they are a little bit more sophisticated creatures. He obviously was kind of in charge of the rock wolves in a way, even though he wasn't part of their clan or whatever. He scares them into following them, or into following him, them into following him. And he tries to attack them with the rock wolves. Of course, they were able to scare off the rock wolves enough that all they really had to deal with was him. But we now have seen, in this small space, 3 different types of creatures that we didn't know existed before. We really haven't seen too much of the creatures in this world except for in these small little parts. So we are continuing to build this world, making it into a place that has more creatures in it, more beings, more things to be cautious of. And so we're still, even in book 3 of 5, building this world and making it more realistic, more complex, more full of beings and people. So we are continuing to see this world building. And we also kind of have this tie back to the beginning with the prologue, because in the prologue we talked about these creatures that became under the god of Ul because nobody else would claim them to be their god. And originally they didn't have any problems. They lived peacefully with the people. But then when the orb was taken and everything happened with Torag, they all went crazy and mad and dispersed. So we're now finally seeing the tie back of what happened to these creatures, and we're seeing that they are crazy and they are attacking and they are vicious and monstrous. So we do see the results of what the prologue was telling us in this set of chapters so far. We might meet more creatures, we don't know at this point, but we are starting to finally see a little bit more of what this world has to offer. And we do know that around the Prologue area was where these creatures were residing before they went mad from the prologue. So now we are finally getting to see a little bit more of a linking between the past that we saw as that prologue's mythology type explanation or story, and we are seeing it now, how it's affecting the group as of the today, and that it does make that connection. That the reason we knew about this earlier was to set us up for this moment and possibly future moments while they're still in Prologue. We don't know. And obviously it doesn't have to be just Prologue that these creatures can go. We don't exactly know where all these creatures live other than the few instances that we've seen them at this point. So what do you think of the world, and what do you think of these creatures? Do you find them unique? I find them very interesting compared to, a lot of other creatures that I've seen in other stories. I feel like they're very much specific to this storyline, very interesting, and I am excited to see what more this world has to offer us. Alright, so those are the three main things I wanted to discuss for this set of chapters. I know it went by kind of fast and it wasn't quite as detailed as I normally get, but I feel like these chapters are really setting us up. I feel like these were kind of in between chapters. This was getting us from one point to our next point and offering us a little bit of growth on the things that we've already learned about. So growth on knowing more about Aldur, growth on what we know about magic and how it works, growth on world building, which we already have, 2.5 books worth of world building and knowing what this world is, and we're just adding a little bit more to it, making it a little bit more complex. And during this time, it is just the important things that we need to know to get from point A to point B, which will then hopefully at point B give us a lot more in-depth things to work with, maybe a little bit more excitement depending on what's to come, and something more that's going to be a little bit more hearty to talk about. But I do think that these chapters still do give us some important things with this building. I mean, you always as a reader are interested in knowing more and understanding more about this world and the people that live in it, or the creatures that live in it, and how the magic works and how the gods work, and more and more and more. You always have more questions and you always want to find out more. So I think that these are still important chapters. They just don't offer us quite as much as maybe some other chapters do. It's more of a transition period. And they were a little bit shorter chapters, I also will admit. They were a little bit shorter this time. So hopefully you enjoyed what I found to discuss today. You find it interesting and can relate to anything. Let me know your opinions about these chapters. Obviously, if I missed anything, let me know down below. And I will go ahead and get us wrapped up with our nitty gritty. So I have 4 nitty gritty points to talk about today that I thought were pretty interesting. And the first thing is more of a observation on the fact that Dernick was called the man with 2 lives. So I feel like that's very interesting that Dernick is given a title, which obviously is confusing, like what does a man with 2 lives mean? But he has given a title for this group that seems to be gathering people that are symbolically something to this prophecy. We do know that, certain members are being recruited on purpose because they represent a particular person that relates to this prophecy. But Dernick was supposed to be someone that just happened to go along with them. He refused to go and stay at Faldur's farm when Aunt Pole was in danger and when Garon was in danger. So it seems very interesting to me that the way it was presented at the beginning of this story was that Aunt Pole didn't really want Dernick to come or expect Dernick to come, on this mission, on this in this group, but he ended up forcing himself upon the group because he was not going to be left behind. And yet he seems to have a title that goes along with this prophecy. So my question now about it is, did Durnick really just happen to join this group, or was that all like a con or a manipulation on their parts to make it seem like he was inserting himself into this adventure, and he didn't really know that he has a specific part to play in it? What did you guys think of that? Did it surprise you that he was called the man with two lives? And what do you think that will mean for the future? I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Next is Mandorallen's new laughter. He ends up riding into battle against some Algroths that they had on their trail. And when they go to fight them, he's just laughing and laughing and laughing. Which he was not laughing before, and that shows that what Durnick said to him stuck in a more literal sense than they expected, but also that it is a sign that he has felt fear once again. Even though he's encountered them again, and last time he didn't feel any fear, now he does feel the fear. And we don't see the laughter, as much, other than this one moment. We do see it just in this one moment. In his other battles, at least I didn't notice any laughter on Mandorallen's part. But I do think it's interesting to note that this is now going to be a new sign that he is fearful. But he also didn't back down. He also didn't back out. He stuck to his advice and did his laughter in order to conquer his fear, and helped his friends, and felt more refreshed afterward, I think. He came back encouraged, I believe, by the fact that he was able to feel fear and fight anyway. So I do think that that's really interesting, and we are going to see possibly more times that Mandorallen will laugh and show that he is afraid now that he has experienced fear. I think that's very interesting, and it definitely is a development of his character. And then we've got Belgariad's hurt and vulnerability over his wife. He does see his wife's spirit as a wolf, as she has come down and helped them to defeat Gruul, and it really, really tears him up inside. Really is hurtful for him to have seen her. And he's very much out of sorts, unlike we've ever seen him, and it really shows him how much he still loves his wife and how much he cares about her, even though it's been a very long time since she's been gone. He truly misses her and loves her still, and has not moved on from his grief. Though he didn't really understand exactly the connection he could have had with her like Polgara does. Polgara has known her mother despite the fact that she died in childbirth and was not able to be around afterward. So I think it's very, very interesting, the dynamic between Belgariad's hurt and seeing that vulnerability that we have not really seen. We've seen little bits of him, vulnerability and the fact of his feelings and stuff like that, but this we truly see him out of sorts, not in command, no longer being able to take charge like he usually does. And then he has Polgara give him a little bit of a wake-up call, saying that he's the only one that's not really connecting to her anymore, and that the daughter that never met her is the one that actually knows more about her spirit and the way that she is now, and how she thinks and feels from beyond death. So very, very interesting moment. Very interesting, again, with this kind of world-building moment that you can bring the dead back momentarily, their spirits, to help the living. Maybe that will come into play more in the future, I don't know, but it's very interesting to think about, and it's very interesting to feel that little bit extra depth to Belgariad as we understand how much he truly is hurt and misses his wife. Even after, thousands of years, he still loves her and misses her, and it really tears at him to just even see her again and know that she's gone all over again. And last but not least, I think it's very interesting that nobody, including Garon himself, is really mentioning the fact that everyone is like treating him like he is the savior of the world. That's basically his title that people have called him, that everyone's resting their hopes on him, and it's such a big responsibility. And they haven't really told him who he is yet, but everyone's saying all these things about how he's so important, and he's basically the king of kings. And there is nobody really, like, Garon's not freaking out about it, and he's not questioning it, and nobody in the party is like, what are you talking about? It's all very much like, oh yeah, like, that seems normal. Did anyone else notice that? I just was thinking, like, normally he would be like, what? I'm sorry, but nobody cares. Even Aldur says, all of our hopes are resting on you. And not one question about, like, hey, what am I doing? What am I supposed to do? What is the plan? What does everybody mean? So he had more questions beforehand, you know, when the seer was the one mentioning that he was somebody important. But now it's like, oh, sure, like, don't really have answers yet, really, but yeah, sure, I'm used to people calling me that, like. So I just thought it was very interesting that the importance of Garon is not questioned at all, including by Garon himself. When I thought that would be something that he would question and wonder about and possibly freak out about. I don't know, I would feel pressure if a god was like, hey, all of our hopes are resting on you. And I understand that the orb kind of already talked to him and told him he was important, but you would just think that he would ask more questions about it, want to know more about what his role is supposed to be. Again, the panicking, the freaking out, to being like, can I really do this? Am I really the person for this job? Do I really want this job? Like, you know? So I just think that that's very interesting aspects that we don't really have very much questioning on. The people who are not supposed to know about Euron's role is not questioning it. I'd like to know what you think on that as well. Of course, I'd like you to know anything about what you've thought about this whole set of chapters, about anything we've talked about so far, any questions, any comments, any concerns, anything at all. I would love to have a conversation with you and to see what you think as well. You're welcome to make a comment down below if that's the best place for you, or you're also welcome to contact me on Facebook, which is /fantasyfiction1. You're welcome to contact me on Twitter, which is @fantasyfiction1. You're also welcome to join the Discord if you would like to chat with your fellow fantasy fanatics. We've got several people over there already chatting and having a great time about things fantasy, not fantasy, anything at all. We're just having a good time chatting together, learning together, and enjoying spreading the joy of fantasy, as well as our other interests. So that link is down below if you'd like to join and chat with us. I am also on there, so you can reach me on there if you'd like to ask questions, talk about anything. Would love to chat with you on there as well. You can also reach me on my blog, fantasyfictionfanatics.net. There is a contact form on there if that is easiest for you, or by email, which is always in the description below. On the blog, you can also get more content from me, different content about what I think about different fantasy things, different book reviews, discussions on different book recommendations, on what I think about different things for fantasy reading, other things like that, and on writing. So lots of different content over there. If you want to see and check it out, I would be happy if you would see what's on there, see if anything piques your interest. And of course, you're always welcome to contact me and talk to me about my blog posts as well. I would love to have a discussion with you on anything and everything. For the next set of chapters for Magician's Gambit, go ahead and read chapters 16 through 20, which for me on this copy is page 173 through... I always forget to get this in advance. I'm sorry, guys. 227. There we go. So 173 through 227 for chapters 16 through 20. Hope you guys are enjoying it. We only have a couple more classes left before we'll be finished with book 3 and can move on to book 4. Okay. I'm trying to think if there's anything I've forgotten, but I think that's it. So I guess I will see you guys in the next class. And yeah, I guess I'll see you later. Bye.